G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you, and our guest today is Porter Stowell, Head of Ecosystem and Community at Filecoin Foundation. Now, AI, as it continues to generate data and consume computing resources at an increasingly frenzied pace, data storage is becoming more and more important. And when it comes to DePIN, Filecoin are the crypto OGs. They are redefining infrastructure for a decentralized web that's completely distributed, data stored on a network of computers all around the world. And so we're really excited to have Porter on the show to talk about it. Let's dive in. Yeah, tell us, how'd you get started in Web3?
Well, my origin story goes back to 2017. I was at IBM at the time, and you got to recall back in 2017, IBM was one of two corporate gigs in all of Web3. There was IBM, and then there was Consensus. And I happened to be at the right place at the right time in IBM, and I lobbied hard to join the blockchain team. It was where all the energy and excitement was in the company. It was an exciting time. And one person I know, Sophia Lopez, was nice enough to put me in as a product manager right before she left to start Kaleido, which is one of the spin-offs of Consensus. And she's been in the space ever since as well. So I started with 2017 as a product manager within the IBM blockchain platform. This is the days of Hyperledger Fabric, private permission blockchains. Mm-hmm. It was very IBM. But again, it was such an exciting time, such a great place to be. And my favorite part about looking back on that time at IBM is just how many of those people I worked with have gone on to do amazing things. We have like Ryan Rugg, who is the head of digital assets at Citibank. Anthony Day is running chief marketing officer at Midnight. I think I can count up to 6 Web3 founders who have come out of the IBM space at that time. We have people are all over doing some really cool stuff in Web3, and it all goes back to those days at IBM. It was such a great and talented group of people. And after doing a stint at IBM in 2021, I went over to Coinbase, where I did my tour at the mothership, if you will, where that is an experience of a lifetime. That if you're part of the Coinbase Mafia or alumni group, you know what I mean. They do product and product management discipline like no one else you've ever seen, and it's just the ultimate pool of alphas, and it was an experience I'll never forget. But then for the last 2 years, I've been at the Filecoin Foundation, working ecosystem and community for the Filecoin project, and that's where I've been ever since.
So for people who might not be familiar with Filecoin or new to blockchain perhaps, what is the Filecoin Foundation?
So the Filecoin Foundation is the stewards of the Filecoin protocol. Filecoin is the world's largest decentralized storage solution. So we have close to 3,000 unique storage provider systems across the globe, where we have real hardware, real racks that can store exabytes of data from across the world. It is built and designed to be a decentralized competitor to public cloud infrastructure, and is a way to advance the internet in terms of data privacy, data control, and security, putting data on chain.
So how did you end up being the Filecoin Foundation's evangelist? Obviously, you mentioned that you'd come across to the Filecoin Foundation, and now you're spruiking Filecoin, to whomever will listen, or, that's not quite fair, but how did you end up in that position, or how did you end up being at Filecoin in the first place?
So honestly, it was almost by fate that I ended up at the foundation. I was looking at multiple opportunities across Web 2.5 and Web 3 at the time. And if I'm being honest, 2 months ago, 2 months before I started at the foundation, I would have told you that Filecoin was in last place on my list of places I'd end up going. But then as I kept with it, and right at the finish line, I just knew that this is where I wanted to go. And what my tale is very similar to what many people's tail is when they join Filecoin or get interested in Filecoin is it intuitively makes sense. It intuitively makes sense that data would be decentralized, that we need alternatives to massive public cloud infrastructure. And what you can do when you decentralize an ecosystem that is very similar to the public cloud, the potential there. I knew firsthand from my time at IBM, I spent time in IBM Cloud, just some of the trappings of working in that environment, from contracting to how business was executed, to innovation, to getting new innovative participants involved in a marketplace. There's just a lot of things that didn't work well, honestly. And then I also saw the phenomenon of, when I started with cloud, there was probably 8 players, but over a very short period of time, I saw that concentration go down to 3. Mm. And, it just reminds me a lot of the banking system. So much of what I do in Web3, I end up making an analogy to Bitcoin because it paved the way. And, ultimately, it felt like this is an opportunity to create a regional banking model where smaller players from across the globe can compete with the big players without having that brand, without having that gravitas, and compete in a way that regional banks do, which is on customer service, on unique offerings. Anyone who's worked in a business, like, you only get so much attention when your bank is JP Morgan, which is why Silicon Valley Bank did so well. Silicon Valley Bank became the startup bank of choice because of customer service. And I don't think those principles ever die. And I saw Filecoin as a way to really usher that in so these small and medium players could actually compete.
Yeah, right. So I guess you're looking at that consolidation, and then you see this decentralized opportunity. What makes you think, or why should we be thinking about data as like the next big asset class right now and into the future? Is it not already dominated? You mentioned there might be some opportunity in that like regional banking model, but where is that opportunity? Why is data important? I mean, it sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but tell us why data is important.
Well, let's go back to the history. I love, there's a stat that said in the history of the modern world to about 2003, there was about 5 exabytes of data created from everyone. By the end of 2010, I think that number was about 10 exabytes of data. So it doubled in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And again, people can't fathom an exabyte of data. It's just, you can't, I don't even know how to contextualize how much data that is. Even a petabyte is like, I think a petabyte of data is 4,000 digital photos taken every day for the rest of your life. Or your entire life. I think that's what it is, which even that's hard to fathom.
Yeah.
And now we're, as of end of last year, I think the world is creating 329 exabytes of data a day. So you have this huge growth in just data. And this is before AI has gone mainstream. So data growth is growing exponentially. And, one premise is that public cloud can't store it all. Even if they're storing 30%, 40%, whatever their market share is, that's still a ton of data left that needs to be stored from everyone. And you go back to like when public cloud came onto the market, everyone just said, well, this is great. I can store it for so cheaply. I can get on-prem solutions, I should say. And everyone started putting their data into public cloud. The public cloud providers made it very easy to come in, made it very expensive to move around. So that's why they were referred to as a walled garden. Hey, come on in. It's nice and cheap, nice and easy. Oh, but once you want to go out, once you want to move around, really expensive. That moving is a term we've referred to as egress. And egress fees are the bane of enterprise
sure.
AWS bills because they really pile up. But because data was so cheap to store, everyone started storing all of it. Mm-hmm. now that the amount of data that they're storing is really piling up. So I got a question for you. Have you ever moved apartments?
Have I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you by chance rent a storage unit when you moved?
I have in the past, yeah.
Yep. And what did you put in that storage unit?
Usually the big furniture, stuff that wasn't particularly easy to move or couldn't just take one from one place to the next. And then just...
And how long did you hold on to that storage unit?
Oh man, genuinely longer than I had intended to. I don't know, a couple of months probably, more than I needed to.
All right. So you just rented your storage unit, you put some big furniture, you put some junk in there, you put some boxes. Now been 2 months since you visited said storage unit. Mm-hmm. You open up the garage for the first time and you're just looking at this little cube packed with all your stuff. What was your reaction when you revisit all that stuff? Do you recall?
For me, yeah, I was like, all right, a couple of things. So firstly, I was just reminded of what I hadn't done. There was a couple of things that I knew that I needed and a heap of stuff that I was like, why did I even keep it? That's basically it.
Yeah, and I think your reaction and your process is similar to everyone else's, where you realize very quickly there's only 2 types of stuff in there. You have things that have monetary value or sentimental value, and for the most part, you could say furniture has a utility where okay, I can use this. So let's call it the 3 types of data. And that's really no different than what businesses were doing. They took all their data and shoved it into a storage unit because the storage unit had the room, didn't cost that much. Problem solved for another day. But you still have to go through and figure out at some point what has value, what's sentimental, and what has utility. The sentimental stuff in the business world is frankly just what we call intellectual property. This is stuff that you want to keep that you know has value, but really only has value to you. But you also don't want it to get out. You don't want it in the hands of other people because it's really personal to you. And again, I think of that as IP. The utility stuff is frankly stuff that doesn't really end up in storage, archival storage for that long anyways. These are the data that kind of lives in the hot storage or warm storage category because you use it. Again, the first thing you would have done if you got a new apartment was got your couch out of storage because you need a place to sit. Yeah. So I think of like hot data as those utility functions. The rest of it, you're saying, well, I'm not going to use this, but I think it has value. Let me sell it. And I think that is the point where we are with data. So everyone has been storing their data in their little storage unit for a long time, call it 15 years plus. And now they're beginning to have the conversation on what has value. And there's a very specific reason why they're doing this now versus last year, versus over the pandemic, versus before the pandemic. And that is because of the rise of AI. And what AI is going to do for data is it's creating a universal buyer. It's hard to understand what something is really worth until someone is able to give you a market price for it. And I think that's where we're on the precipice of. And as that becomes more mainstream, people will be having that conversation more and more. Maybe they put more data in the sentimental bucket or the IP bucket. That's fine. I think the current stat right now is 20% of the data in the world is publicly available, while 80% of the data is behind lock and key. No one probably really knows if that is an accurate, continues to be accurate, but it's a good thumb in the wind, like benchmark for you to conceptualize just how much data is out there and how much, people don't have access to it. So I don't think all 80% of that data is going to get released to the public, But what if it goes to 50%? Because now as an organization, I have comfort and controls that I can protect my data from an IP standpoint, put it out in there in an open marketplace for it to find its price. And I know that I can have control and compensation for when it's being used. And that's what AI is bringing to the table for data.
So why is that kind of data that you're talking about, why would my data be valuable to somebody else? So we're talking about training AI models. Are we talking about people wanting to learn how to market to me better? Why would there be value to that?
Yeah, so we'll take
what kinds of data are we talking about as well?
Yeah, we'll take that from both an individual and business perspective. So let's start with the individual. I think everyone knows intimately what's going on. You have online behaviors using any social media platform of your choice. Everyone knows that their data and behaviors are being monetized through the use of that social media platform.
Yeah.
I don't think people know just how much money these platforms are making off of your behaviors. There's the general where you could come up with an average, but I kind of think of it like this, where do you ever, hear the median home price is in the US is like, I don't know, 300 something thousand dollars in the US. And, most people go, where do you find a house for 300? Where does this house exist?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the same with social media, like the value of a profile. There's going to be some profiles that are extremely valuable, mm-hmm. that are being sold. So like, let's say like I'm Mark Cuban and I'm a billionaire. I'm on these social media platforms. I want the choice to say, I don't want anyone to use my data. I don't need I don't need compensation. I just don't use it. He should have that choice. It's not about the money, but other people should have the choice and control to say, yes, I am willing to sell my behaviors to a bidder, because everyone, they already know your persona, your demographics, your breakdown, and they already have that capability to make a market for you based on your behaviors. All we're saying is that how do you compensate someone for sharing that information? I think Brave, the Brave browser, attempted to do this and were unsuccessful. But those attempts are not going to stop. I don't know for certain, but I could see Brave continuing on trying to solve this problem, but it will be solved eventually. And I don't know how a user would not pivot to that option if it existed.
Yeah, especially if it could be ambiguated somehow, or if there's some way to do a zero knowledge version where, or maybe you could opt in if it's more valuable and you'd care less about being known. Maybe there'd be different kind of levels of being able to, I don't know, engage with that kind of marketplace.
Exactly. And where I think Brave was on the right track is the Brave browser has a Brave, it's a browser wall. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense to me, because if I'm going to participate in this type of economy, I want my data to go right into my Brave wallet that's already synced up with the browser itself. So now I just know all my behaviors and cookies are going right there, where now it's in a wallet where it behaves like any other Web3 wallet, where I have control permissions and I have that point of contact, or I have that level of control because it's in my wallet. And that I think is going to be a necessary step for this to actually work, because once it's in my wallet, I know I have some protections and control.
Yeah, gotcha. So Brave got that part right. What else do we need to create this data economy?
So I look at, from the top down is you need a marketplace where, how do people plug in, whether it's individuals or businesses, where is this data going to be transacted? Now you go down from there. So you're going to need, all right, I need authenticated data. So I need to know that if I'm buying, MIT research or maybe Pfizer research, I need to know that it came from Pfizer. So that's going to be your DID solution. So how can I authenticate at the point of upload? So there's I know Adobe is working on this from a photo standpoint, where again, you can tag and have some watermarks within the photo as you upload it. That's unique to you. That gives you some protection. And that there's some good progress in photos from the phone to online that can authenticate. That's occurring right now, but you need that more universal than just photos. So you need some sort of authentication at the point of upload. Mm-hmm. You need, on-chain provenance, so you can see if it's, maybe I create a digital asset that I can transfer ownership. I need to be able to follow that provenance. So I know it went from you to me to someone else, and I do actually, whoever is putting it on the marketplace actually does have ownership over the asset. And then at the base level, where I get excited from a Filecoin standpoint is I have a premise that all digital assets of value will live on chain. Data is no different. It is just an underappreciated, misunderstood digital asset. You see, things like Hedera and Provenance blockchains, they're focused on real world assets. A lot of financial products going online, mortgages, HELOCs, stuff like that. And data is going to be the next big asset class because we're generating so much of it. And once people understand it has value and it has cash flows, that's when it's really going to take off. Cash flows come from two ways. One is, with the rise of AI agents, there's going to be a lot of chat functions that are going to be specialized. Especially, it's easy to think about in a regulated industry such as medicine, healthcare. You think of an LLM there or a chat GPT for healthcare, it's going to have to, it can't just scrape the internet for everything. Mm-hmm. It needs to have very specific research that is trusted, quality, authenticated for that LLM. So now if I'm engaging with a chat function within that type of use case, I ask a question, it's going to pull from a source. So if it pulled from my research and my research was used in the response, there's a micropayment there. So you need smart contracts. And so that payment gets automated. And then let's say the user says, well, I want to dive into that research. I want to download that research for some work I'm doing or something in particular. They can go and retrieve that file. And when they do that, the creator and data owner is compensated for that retrieval. And so you have two forms of cash flow now. And the way I think about it is that everyone has heard of publish or perish within the research field in academia. And what I foresee happening is that the goal will be to create branded data sets for your research that can be sold to LLMs. That way, the university and the creator, or the professor or the researcher, they get compensated in perpetuity for the use of that data. And it becomes a recurring cash flow model. You're still going to publish a book, but that's more of a marketing tool to ensure that the world knows about your research in natural language, so they know how to find you, know how to understand what it is that you've created. And maybe those abstracts and parts of the book are used to train LLMs, but you can still get credit for that from a cash flow perspective. And that would just totally change the game from a sustainable business model for these academic research institutions. At the base of all this is Filecoin, because if you're going to store these large data sets on chain, you're going to participate in this economy, like this data economy, you're going to need three things. You're going to need programmability, immutability, and verifiability. And that's what Filecoin can offer. That's what gets me excited. I remember back in 2014, I was at IBM. Ginny Rometty was talking, CEO at the time of IBM, was talking about data as the new gold. It was a very popular topic. Wired did an article about it. And I remember that really left a mark on me. And I saw like, wow, that is the future. If there's one thing IBM does really well, is it actually can predict the technological future pretty well. The problem is they're just way too early and they can't execute on it. But they're very good at seeing the future. And I feel like it's 10 years later and that future is being materialized. I mean, same thing happened with AI. If you remember at the time, 2014, Watson was all the rage. And now here we are 10 years later. Now AI is really going mainstream. I mean, it's actually remarkable on how accurate IBM has been on predicting the future in technology for, frankly, the last 70 years. And so you have programmability, immutability, and verifiability of your data, which is your quality assurance. Because if these data sets are going to be transacted 1,000 times a day, maybe 100 times a day, how does the buyer and the seller know instantly that this is good? I'm buying quality. It's a difficult proposition, and that's where I think Filecoin has a unique value prop, and that's where I think the protocol really shows itself.
Man, that's awesome. I mean, a couple of the things when I tease out of what you just mentioned there is one of the things that has frustrated me for a very long time is how siloed, in particular, research can be. Where if you treat research like IP, for example, to protect your IP, because that's important, especially if it's something that, you want to commercialize at some stage, to give more commercialization options rather than holding onto something until you can do something with it at some unknowable time in the future, to have less kind of knowledge silos like that, for me, is very exciting in terms of the advances in medicine and technology that is probably already on the table, but because they're all in little boxes, black boxes that each other can't see inside of, we can't actually benefit from the knowledge that's already been developed, where 2 or 3 different kinds of technologies that may not be able to be commercialized right now might be able to come together, or aspects of them come together. And so when you have a data economy like you're mentioning, we could actually see those put to use, and potentially even with AI, find some of these that we wouldn't have otherwise, or it might have been sitting in the proverbial storage unit for the next 100 years. That's exciting to me.
Yeah, and you really gotta put yourself in the shoes of the researcher to really appreciate some of the status quo behaviors that go on even today. So if you're a research institution in the US and you want to collaborate with a research institution in India, let's say, how do you get that data to your Indian colleagues so they can be additive to what the work you've already done? Chances are you're shipping hard drives. You're putting them in a box and mailing them.
Right.
Okay. Now the box of drives shows up in India. Like they're going to download it, they're going to use it, but like they now have a copy. It's no longer a unique it's no longer a unique asset, because you gave them everything for the betterment of humanity, but you had no protections and controls for a data set of that size. Like, I mean, these research files are easily over a petabyte. And like when you change the game where 1, you don't have to ship the drives, 2, you have control over protection, and 3, you get potentially to a place where it can be monetized. Again, research, for the most part, they're not trying to monetize. They're trying to do things for the good of humanity. So it's not really there yet, but maybe that data goes somewhere else after that university. Maybe that's a place where you can monetize after that. And you're seeing this already. Why I think now is an interesting time, because you're seeing the New York Times versus OpenAI case, where, if anyone not familiar with that case, basically OpenAI said, we're just going to scrape the internet, and we're going to be sure to scrape a lot of the New York Times content. New York Times is like, well, that's our IP. But on the one hand, New York Times, put it on the internet.
Yeah.
So I get, but like whether or not New York Times actually wins, I don't think is important. What is important is that everyone else is going to go, no, I'm just going to protect my IP. I'm not going to have these open AI or these AI platforms scrape my data without me knowing or without my permission to their benefit. And then they're gonna block it. They're gonna secure it, firewall it, whatever they need to do to make sure that they have control over that intellectual property.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned AI a bunch of times already. I'm wondering if AI has really only kind of found its product market fit, if you like, or even technological capacity to operate at a commercial level in the last couple of years. How is Filecoin, that pre-exists those last couple of years, how are you thinking about or incorporating AI, or how is that changing how you are thinking about data and data economy?
Well, in the very micro sense of the world, what we've seen is the mass proliferation of decentralized compute networks. So these are your caches, your renders, IOs, vast networks. And, we were talking last year, if we were talking last year at this time, it just wasn't even part of your day-to-day conversation. They really come on extremely fast. And what I love about decentralized compute is it makes a lot of sense. GPU shortage, these marketplaces are going, let's round up all the idle GPUs and offer them to people who need GPUs. Makes a lot of sense given just the global GPU shortage out there because of AI. That makes sense. And why it's so great is that it's normalizing the value of decentralization. This is the first decentralized AI blockchain use case out there that has gotten mass adoption, full stop. And from it, and so I think of in a cycling analogy, decentralized storage can fall into the slipstream of decentralized compute. Because ultimately, now you start thinking about it, you want, as if I'm going to provide compute to these LLMs for training, the training of their data sets, where is that data? And so now the next evolution of that is, I should put the data close to the compute.
Yeah.
All right. Now this is getting into a state for where Filecoin and the storage provider network of Filecoin can participate. Already, the storage providers that have been in Filecoin since mainnet launch 3 years ago are very active in the compute marketplaces. This is because they have modern hardware, large bandwidth connections, great power sources, good OpEx, high quality equipment, trained operators. So they have all the ingredients that compute networks love to make sure that there's high quality GPUs being delivered to their user base. So Filecoin is the storage providers are all over the compute marketplace. But now it's turning into, all right, how do I get at least compute near the data? It's not quite compute over data, but it's compute near the data. And that's a next evolutionary step. We will get to compute over data, but right now it's how can we get to the compute near the data? So if I'm going to if someone has excess GPUs and I'm going to give them a compute job, I should give them the data as well to store. So there's that proximity. And at the market, and then you're getting into the decentralized AI plays, where now they're just bundling up. So you get data marketplaces, you get things like what Morpheus are doing, where you're creating this whole decentralized network for decentralized AI components and players, and it's all very synergistic. So the goal for Filecoin is to be essential to this decentralized AI narrative and use case around the concepts of programmability, immutability, and verifiability. And Filecoin is doing very well in that space. And there's just a lot of talented people and momentum that gets you really excited. So that's what we're doing on the ground level in terms of this space, because that's where organically it's going to rise from this foundation. In terms of the data economy, I think you need to build up the data, get the compute and data storage in alignment, and then build up the stack so you can actually get into the marketplaces. But still, you're going to need things like DID solutions before I think it really goes mainstream.
Gotcha. You've touched on that just there, but how do we then get away from big tech's cloud computing dominance? Maybe even just when it comes to like basic compute storage, training LLMs, how does decentralized compute and storage, how can you compete with the cloud? We've talked about incentivization, but what does that materially look like, and how can you incentivize enough that people will want to participate? So we haven't even really talked about what does it mean to be a storage provider or compute provider. We should talk about that as like, what does it actually materially mean? And can anybody do it? Or do you need to have like racks of servers and GPUs? And then how do you communicate the preference for a decentralized version?
Wow, lots of questions in there.
Yeah.
Let me start with when I joined Filecoin, and why one of the reasons I joined Filecoin is because of the concept of data monetization. Again, I'd been familiar with the term for 8 years at that point, and then I saw a pathway to get there through Filecoin. And where I thought everyone would FOMO into Filecoin, because it's ultimate, like when you're in Web3, there's always going to be like this FOMO in moment. And it's not about token price. It's just about behaviors. How do I get Web2 businesses to say, I have to do this? And this is the best, easiest path to do it. And that's when data monetization happens. And you think of like any big Fortune 500 company, they're like, well, I'm going to store this data on Filecoin because I understand this is what I think it has value. So I'm going to put it there just to see if there's a market for it. And I know it's past my CTO, CIO, CISO's tests on that I have security and protections, so I have control. I understand the monetization component, whether like how the smart contract works. So I've audited that. So I've de-risked it to a certain degree, so I have nothing to lose. And in that moment, that's when I think enterprise FOMO's in. Especially when you're going to have like some pioneer company that is selling their data to an LLM, and it goes from a cost center to a revenue center. Maybe not a revenue center, or maybe it just goes cost neutral, because data storage costs are going up every year because you're just storing more of it. The price per storage is going down, but you're just storing way, way more of it. So your overall price is going up. So that's the moment where I think it goes bananas. And frankly, I think everyone can win. If you look at Web 2, I mean, data monetization is already close to $1 billion industry. Like, this is out there today. It's just in silos. So if you want to sell data, you're very entrenched to the AWS, Google, IBM silo. Where it becomes interesting is when you go decentralization, you break down those silos. Now everyone can you don't have to like log into your AWS account, then your IBM account, then your Oracle account to monetize your data. You're going to a single point where it becomes like an open marketplace. And once it's in an open marketplace, you can think of a New York Stock Exchange as an example. You have liquidity. You're really creating liquidity around your data set, and you're creating cash flows. And then once Wall Street gets a hold of the fact that this could be turned into an asset-backed security, then once it gets securitized, then it goes to another level of maturity, another level of global scale, where people are buying ownership and rights to it and trying to monetize it. There's a reason why people buy the copyrights to the Beatles songs and Michael Jackson's songs, because it has, they're going to get royalties anytime those things are leveraged. Same with data. And where I think it goes is once you get feature parity with an AWS, and we're still such early days for this, for decentralized storage or just decentralized web in general. If you can get to feature parity, then it's game over, because there's too much talent, too much energy, and too much open innovation that can occur within a decentralized ecosystem that, frankly, the Web 2 players just won't be able to keep up after that point.
So how do people participate in it how do people do make it happen in terms of the storage providers you mentioned before, like the fundamental kind of units of Filecoin users, not the people who are kind of utilizing Filecoin for data or marketplace, but actually people who are making it happen. How does that happen? How are you attracting those kinds of people? What do they need to participate? Can literally anybody do it? Is there a minimum threshold? Obviously, you want to have really quality gear because we're talking about people's data and business, like enterprise data as well. And you want to compete at that level, it's got to be really quality material. How do you gauge those things, and how do you attract those kinds of people? So
at first, Filecoin, I think Filecoin followed a similar trajectory to Bitcoin in this particular category. So early days of Bitcoin, you could be someone at home on your computer mining Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. But very quickly, the stakes evolved, where now, to actually mine a block on the Bitcoin network, you have to have certain things in place, or else it's just never going to happen. It's gotten too big, too sophisticated very quickly, that it's, you have to have capital, OpEx, all these things to be successful. Mm-hmm. So the bar is very high to be a successful Bitcoin miner. Makes sense. Filecoin is no different. So at first, when everyone thought, I could just store some data on my computer and earn block rewards, and that was true, but the bar raised very quickly. So now what we're seeing in Filecoin is these are very sophisticated players who have, call it 10 plus years of data storage, networking, and operating systems experience. Whereas before, all these people, they had to work at big tech. There was no other job that would allow them to be a global player than by working in big tech. But with Filecoin, they said, now I can pursue entrepreneurial endeavors and still maintain my skill set. And in fact, they tend to get very addicted to it, because now they can do all the things and really dive into the whole system, from networking to operating systems to orchestration software. They can do it all, and they're just kids in a candy store, because now they're not limited to a specific swim lane. So we tend to get those people from Web 2 who always wanted to be entrepreneurs in this space, and it was just those opportunities were difficult. So there is a level of sophistication at this point for people joining the network as storage providers.
Sure.
I think over time, I know we're working on it, but it's a very difficult problem. Where how do you simplify and abstract a lot of the complexities of storing data on the network? How do you, whether it's a hub and spoke service, or just allows people to participate in varying degrees of technical expertise, abstracting away the parts that they don't want to focus on because it's not their skill set. Those solutions are coming. Some of those solutions are there. I call it Filecoin as a service, but even then, they're not for everyone. I remember there's a Bitcoin mining game that's kind of fun, where you can decorate your rig, you turn it into an NFT, you can upgrade the power, you can upgrade certain things, and it's always mining Bitcoin for you. We're not there yet, but eventually you'll get to a point where Filecoin has these levels of applications that can allow people to store data, even though all the complexity and all the racks and plugs and bandwidth are abstracted from them, but not there yet.
So how do other people build on Filecoin? For example, is it like with ChatGPT, you might have a website or an app. You ask it a question, it tells you it gives you some data. How do we engage in the marketplace, data marketplace? How do we engage with is it through the wallet specifically? Are there APIs? Are there other kinds of like an SDK that people need to be able to engage with? How does that actually work?
So the first philosophical battle to win is just one of, I want control over my data, and I want to know where my data lives and have authority to move it at my own discretion. So I love the Bitcoin analogy that goes, when you give your money to a bank, it's no longer your money. They've just written you an IOU.
Uh-huh.
That made a lot of sense to me. It's now the bank's money. And I kind of feel the same way about data. Once you give your data to a public cloud, it is not your data, but they've given you an IOU, or we can. So we're trying to, if you need to win that philosophical battle of the value and principles of decentralized storage. And in that regard, Filecoin does very well with Web3 native companies. And what do they want? Whether it's the platform itself, the application itself, or their user base, they're trying to store their data on Filecoin. So, this is same is occurring for L1s and L2s. So right now, Filecoin stores about 10% of the Solana network, backs up the Solana network. And that's a big deal. But if you look at all the other L1s, it's such a small percentage of the data that's actually stored on chain. I don't know the exact figure, but it's single digits for sure. That is the antithesis of the philosophy. Yeah. So you can't be preaching on-chain future without storing your data on chain. It's counterintuitive. But so much of what goes on is that people get these Google Cloud credits, AWS credits, and there's just such hooks and established behavioral patterns on how to leverage AWS credits, for example, as a startup, that you kind of just go with what you know, because it's not your core value proposition, but it is a part and component to your story. So typically what we use is an SDK with one of our ecosystem software providers who will just abstract away in that drag and drop fashion that most people are accustomed to, call it the Dropbox UI, to just put that data on the network. And in return, you'll get, just like a file system, or you'll see the timestamp proof of space-time that shows your data is on chain and that it's been verified on a daily basis. It's those continuous proofs that Filecoin provides that's really its unique and special sauce. And again, you have control over where it lives, who's holding it. And again, it's about mobility, control, and monetization. But again, monetization isn't there yet, but at least you have that control and access without the egregious egress costs when you go and attempt to move it around. So that's where we're seeing a lot of plays. We're also working with a lot of L1s to make sure that we're winning in this philosophy. You can't be storing your data off chain and also be preaching the values of decentralization or going on chain in your application. So until we get what does 10% of all the L1 data look like on Filecoin? What does 50% of the data look like on Filecoin? I want to say that there's close to $700 billion of value at risk here, because that's, if you look at the size of these blockchains, there's $700 billion worth of value, and in single digits, and it's all just data. The value is data. And if single digits of that is stored on chain, that to me creates a risk.
How are you finding that message being received by these L1s and L2s? Without like giving away any secrets, but just anecdotally or kind of big picture, how are you finding that?
The key is it's always a trade-off conversation between the right now and the future state.
Mm-hmm.
Look, storage by design is not exciting. It's the bottom of the stack.
Yeah.
It is, by definition, it is as boring as it comes. So no one really wants to deal with it. It's not value add. But I think, you need to have a lot of features and functions that can meet their needs. And we've been building to get to that point. Every client is unique in that sense. So you're trying to get to at least to a point where you can have 80% standardization, 20% customization, and improve, and even increase that number to 90-10. So there's a lot of engineering work that needs to store data at that side with certain SLAs and functions that any client is going to expect. So there's some building that needs to be done to make sure it's airtight. Absolutely. It's already airtight, but again, it's a lot of these other ancillary things that they want to do with their data that you need to perhaps build in as well. It's not just the storage. So we're getting to that point, but there's also no need that you need a motivation to move. And the motivation to move is when, one, you try to move data around and you get hit with those egress bills. That causes a lot of pain. Two, your data, again, it doesn't go, very rarely does it go up in like that huge jump on a daily basis. It kind of just grinds higher.
Yeah.
When things grind higher, you kind of you're not paying attention, and then all of a sudden you pay attention. So you need the pain to make a switch. Otherwise, new technology adoption, if you can start native with these newer players who believe in decentralization, and you can get them early before their data growth really kicks in, that's a much easier proposition. So, winning those battles are very easy for Filecoin. It's the switching cost, whether it's Web 2 enterprise or some of these L1s, that's a harder proposition because now you need to devote resources, you need to pay attention to it, you need to ask a lot of questions, and it's just a longer sales cycle, if you will.
If you were to put a time frame on it, how long do you think it's going to be until this reaches some sort of critical mass, or at least a tipping point of not ubiquity necessarily, but just acceptance in little Web 3, but Web 2 or just the marketplace at large?
My view on crypto in general is it's very fashionable. So there's certain things that come into vogue, and that's all that gets talked about. And then it gets blessed. Some things get blessed as this is now the new standard. I've seen it enough times. And so you need whether it's a Vitalik, it's not to say that, we need to ingratiate ourselves to the Ethereum community, which would be, that's a huge opportunity, but it takes these leaders or influencers, if you will, to bless, this is the way. And then you get all the followers. And with crypto, maybe that's the investment side of the house where, people are just trying to, hit a wave of price appreciation. Maybe it's the developers who set the new standard on a more organic building standpoint. It can come from anywhere, but some group blesses a solution, and that's where you see real change, real adoption, and very quickly. So again, there's nothing you can really do on the price stuff. So you don't need to waste your time. So you focus on the builders, you focus on the users, and how you can support them. And, if the investment community picks it up, great. If not, it's not a big deal, but you're trying to win the builder battle. And I do think, why I think Bitcoin won is because they won a philosophical argument that was very concise and pithy.
Yeah.
Which is and the way I describe Bitcoin is every central bank on the planet is printing money. And if that is the case, the value of the currency you're holding, whether it's US dollars, euros, or whatever, is by default going down.
Mm-hmm.
And they are stealing from you. That is my 2-line answer on why, like the philosophy of why you should adopt Bitcoin. I think Filecoin or any L1 needs to get to that level of pithiness for it to have really what we're talking about is stickiness. So everyone knows in the back of their head, I need to do this and I can't wait. And so the reason I focus on the data economy is that I think the data economy, where you begin to monetize the value of your data, it has that stickiness. And again, I think it's going to be here 3 to 5 years. I don't think it's here today or this year, 2024. I think you're seeing the blocks being built already. And those blocks, layer 1 blocks, the layer 1 is probably the bad way to describe it. Like the foundational blocks, then you're going to get a second tier of capabilities, and then you're going to get the unlock of the data economy. But I see those components being built. I see how they're going to integrate together. And then once people see that, oh my God, this is probably one of my most valuable assets besides my house, my investment portfolio, it could be data number 3. It should be data number 3. I think data is going to be the 3rd largest digital asset class behind Bitcoin and stablecoins. So currently, the stablecoin for value for US stablecoins is close to 170 billion right now. So I kind of use that as my benchmark, where it's really hard to conceptualize that the value of data would be worth $170 billion. And I would say currently we're at 1.
Yeah.
So that's a 70x over the next 5 to 10 years.
And it's stuff that's already sitting there, right? So it's about just actually unlocking the value already there.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this is a 70 bagger over the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm a big fan of Mark Yusko from Morgan Creek Digital. He coined the term the ABCDs, and he said his premise is that all the major returns in technology investment will be within a single vertical or a combination of AI, blockchain, chips, and data. ABCD. And my view of the data economy is it takes all 4 of those premises, investment premises, and wraps it all into one solution.
Yeah. I mean, my next question was going to be, what are you most excited about for the rest of this year? If we've got a 3 to 5 year time frame on the things that you were talking about, in particular with Filecoin, really not just materializing because they're already here, but actually becoming broadly used. What's in the near future? I mean, 3 years is pretty near, but in crypto language, what's in the near future? What are you most excited about?
I'm excited for the next wave of participants.
Right.
I felt like 2020, 21, huge influx of new participants. And from my time at Coinbase to my time at Filecoin, the one thing I saw consistent that I don't think people understand is that the amount of talent coming into the Web3 space is by far and away the best talent. Just go to MIT, go to Stanford. talk to those students who are like dual majoring in, computer science, cryptography, and economics. Where are they going to go work? They're not going to Goldman Sachs like they used to when I was in my 20s. They're going to Web3. They're going to crypto. And that you see that across tech. So engineering talent, they're going into Web3 or AI or a combination of both. And what the light bulb moment for me was in 2022. Wait, when was it? It was, 2022 was FTX, right?
Yeah.
Where everyone, look, I don't care who you are. You questioned your decision about your career at that point if you were in Web3. What am I doing? Did I just blow it? Again, everyone asked the question. Not everyone took it seriously, but when I asked myself that question, I bought Bitcoin because right then and there, so I didn't buy a lot, but I bought some at 16 because I couldn't find anyone who said, I'm going back to Web 2.
Yeah.
Didn't exist. And, you call them the normies, but no one, if you're not in this world, no one leaves it. No one. Once you see the other side of the fence, no one goes back. And that is a powerful force. So if you have enough talented intellectuals who are committed and passionate about building, big things are going to happen. And it's been there. And these, the people I work with, a lot of the times have been in it for 2-3 years. Now what happens when there's the next hiring spree? We all know that 2020, there was a hiring spree and then it cooled off in 2020. But when the next one kicks in, it's going to bring in a whole new crop of talent, and it's just going to tilt the scales even more. And once people, I'm convinced that, like myself, once people see what it's like to operate in Web3, the passion, the commitment, the energy, they won't go back either. And then, if you build this builder army, what is the potential? That's what I get excited about.
That's cool. Yeah, man, that's cool. Porter, if someone wants to find out more information about Filecoin or to hear from you more, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so if you want to know more about Filecoin Foundation has a very simple website. It's called fil.org. You can learn anything and everything from just being a token holder to being a storage provider to building software to being someone who stores data on the network, whether you're an individual or a business. There's lots of great resources there. Myself, I am everywhere online. I'm on Twitter at Stowell Porter. LinkedIn, I'm at Porter Stowell. I do most of my posting on LinkedIn, which is intentional because my network is tech. And I'm trying to convince people to make the choice to dive into Web3. For so long, I was in the Web 2 side of the house. I am trying to save my old colleagues and network, trying to convince them to come over to swim in the more luxurious pool.
Good idea. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like we just scratched the surface and there's a lot more we could have talked about. But I really appreciate you helping us understand why data is so important, what kinds of solutions you're building and how it could be a part of it. Really, really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Fun as always. Let's do it soon.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Off-Chain Podcast. We love bringing you great guests like Porter and hope you've learned more about Web3, about data, why it's important, about technology, and about the future and how you might help build it. As always, like, subscribe, and better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word and join us again next week for another exciting episode of the Off-Chain Podcast. Till then, take care.